Hello, yes, a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Bolden Sports Media NFL podcast, coming to you in what I suppose is really officially the start of the dead period of the NFL offseason. We've had the draft. Now really you're looking forward to things like OTAs and mini camps, how much you can really sort of get news and excitement out of them. There will obviously be some clips and there'll probably be some injury news that comes off it, but for the most part, we're not really going to be seeing that much in terms of, big major events. There will, as I said, there will be some news that comes out of it, but unless there is going to be one of these like shock big trades that Justin Jefferson, for the sake of argument, gets his valuation met by another team around the league, and the Minnesota Vikings say, right, we're just gonna get rid of you and cash in and start rebuilding. Apart from that, there's not going to be much. But I am still very much looking forward to going through the NFL offseason with you. And as I start every single show, I want to thank you very much for tuning in. If you are a new listener, don't forget you can like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you are listening to. And if you are a returning listener, then as always, I thank you very much for your continued support in this new venture of mine. And with all the admin out of the way, it's time to get on with the show. And I suppose the biggest news coming out of the NFL in the past couple of days has been the news that Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be signing with the Miami Dolphins. It is a reported one-year deal in a contract that's set to pay him up to $8.25 million. And there's been various sources and whatever reports about exactly how that's going to break down, of how much the base value is. I think the common consensus is going to be $3 million in base salary, and then the rest is going to be through performances and bonus and all that sort of stuff, which to an extent is a smart move by the Miami Dolphins, because we've seen Odell Beckham's injury history. You can't totally rely on him to be there throughout a whole season, so you're not going to be paying him the money that he was getting when he was with the New York Giants, where he was arguably certainly one of the best wide receivers in the league. If you want to say he was the best, I'll hear the argument. I think there were other better ones around that time. Antonio Brown, just one that comes to mind. But if you want to say he was the best, I'm not going to immediately bat you down over that. But anyway, that is the old Odell Beckham Jr. This current Odell Beckham Jr., I can understand again why the Miami Dolphins would have wanted to get him. They have got this philosophy. They are building up a team in this way where they want to have the most electrifying offense that they can in the league. With Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, with Braxton Berrios and with Raheem Monster. And now if you put Odell Beckham Jr. into that mix, you are seeing a very, scary looking offense, at least in terms of their name value. But it's the name value when it comes to Odell Beckham Jr. that I think is the only thing that's got him this contract. It's nothing to do with his level of production these days. He has not gone. I look back at this. He has not had a season where, and because of his injuries, you can't really judge him on like overall yards in a season. You can't judge him on that. So I think it's only fair to see how much does he get per game. What does he give you when he's actually able to play? He has not averaged more than 50 yards per game in the regular season since 2019. Again, he's had back-to-back knee injuries when he was with the Browns and then with the Rams that forced him to miss the whole of the 2022 season. So, again, I'm not saying anything new here. Odell Beckham Jr. is not what he once was. Anyone will tell you that. But I don't even think he's worth really anything in the NFL these days. Again, you look at the contract, $3 million base, a potential up to 8.25. I would have signed him for league. Again, I'm not saying that Odell Beckham Jr. doesn't deserve to be in the league. I'm just saying that even that extra couple of million that they are potentially looking to pay him, I just wouldn't have done that. Yes, bonuses and whatever, maybe we don't know exactly what they are. Maybe they were very ambitious. Maybe they're very realistic. But that in terms of base salary, I would have signed him for the league veteran minimum. The same as the Russell Wilson got with the Pittsburgh Steelers, because Obviously, there are different circumstances there, but I just think Odell Beckham Jr., again, you're signing him for name value. I don't think you are signing him for production. And if I'm being brutally honest, even in terms of production, I think this is still a wasted move by the Miami Dolphins because they still seem to be stuck with the philosophy that I mentioned earlier, that they want to be electric, they want to be fast, they want to be... But we saw in the playoffs and in the latter stages of the season, that just does not work in the NFL when it comes to December, January, and February. I mean, we saw this before their playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs. They'd lost 10 games in a row when the temperature at kickoff was below 40 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. And then again, it was below 40 degrees and they lost to the Chiefs. This team is just not built for playoff football. And then getting Odell Beckham Jr. is not going to address those problems. Getting another flashy, speedy, skilled player is not what you want. You need a little bit more physicality. You need a little bit more grit. On the offensive side of the ball, this isn't saying anything about the Dolphins' defense because they added Shaquille Barrett, they added Chop Robertson in the offseason, two very astute signings. I think it needs to be said. This isn't about the defense. This is about the offense. That money could very easily have been spent elsewhere. If they'd have been after Derrick Henry, say, and added him to the backfield, that would have been a much better move. Again, the salaries and what you would have expected, totally different. But if this team wants to be effective in the cold weather, that money should have gone towards it should have gone towards a better running back. It's as simple as that. Not a flashy wide receiver. So again, this is going to make all the great headlines. This is going to give them all the excitement. I'm sure he will score a couple of touchdowns in September and in October, and everything will be all fine and dandy. But when it comes to the playoffs, unless they manage to get the number one seed, which is not a total impossibility, I'll admit, but I still think is a bit of a long shot. But unless that happens, and they're going to have to go on the road to a Buffalo or to a Kansas City or to a Cincinnati, they're not going to... It's just going to be a case of rinse and repeat for the Miami Dolphins. And unless this running game does pick up over the course of this season, they are not making a Super Bowl, and the addition of Odell Beckham Jr. is just going to be seen as a little bit of a waste, if I'm being brutally honest. So again, get excited, get hyped, Dolphins fans, but once it turns to November and December, it's just not going to. I just don't think it's going to work out for them. And indeed, it might not work out in the future because it could well be they're going to have to play more cold weather games because of a longer season. And that is because this is news I've been meaning to bring up for the past couple of weeks, but just haven't found the time in the schedule to do it. I felt there were more important things to talk about. But there is talk. There is now, I want to say serious talk, but it's been going on for a couple of years anyway. There is now serious talk that the NFL is going to move to an 18-game schedule. Now, to do this, it's not going to be just as simple as adding another game. There is going to be some additional tweaks to it. Like, for instance, if you go to 18 games, there is talk that they're going to have to add a second bye week. And I think that is definitely going to have to be the case. You cannot ask the players to be doing what they're doing and not give them extra breaks, as it were. So 18 games, each team getting 2 bye weeks, I think is a pretty sensible move. But the rest of it sort of comes around working around the calendar. And they aren't just looking to affect effectively the NFL calendar. They want to change the American calendar as a result. Or at least, maybe not change it, but at least use it to their advantage, shall we say. Because with this extra game, 18 weeks, 2 bye weeks, everything gets pushed back a little bit further. The Super Bowl used to be on the first, around the first weekend of February. Now, with it being a 17-game season, everything gets pushed back. It's now the second weekend in February. What the NFL is going to look to do is have the Super Bowl played on the Sunday of President's Day, which is one of the bank holidays that the Americans have, where a lot of people get the day off. Which is something that a lot of people have been, somewhat ironically calling for, is, the day after the NFL, the Monday after the Super Bowl, should be, a national holiday, should be a national day off, as everyone recovers from their Super Bowl party hangovers, and I'm assuming everyone in the city that wins the Super Bowl has to recover, and maybe that's the day you can get the parades and everything done. So it is a day where American productivity takes something of a downturn for one day as everyone gets over the Super Bowl. So if you combine it with a day that people are already having off anyway, then yeah, make it happen. I would even make the argument, and this is something I have seen thrown about a couple of times, why not just put the Super Bowl on Saturday? I understand that there's tradition and everything, and football is a day, Sunday is a day for football. I get that. It happens all the way through the regular season. But given the fact that we've now brought in Monday night football and Thursday night football, and this year, of course, we're having Friday night football with the game in Brazil, and now there's Saturday football, even in the regular season, once college is over and into the playoffs. So the mold has already been broken, and there was talk about whether or not they'd have football on every night of the week if the schedule would allow them to. So the NFL isn't exactly stuck to the tradition. So why not just put the Super Bowl on the Saturday, on the biggest day of on the best day rather of the week to hold a big event? Why have it on the Sunday? But the Super Bowl argument is just, or Super Bowl point rather, is just a small point in the whole thing around an 18-game schedule. And if I'm being honest, I just hope that the schedule talk ends there. 18 games should be the maximum. It used to be 14 regular season games, then it got moved to 16, then 17. Now they're finally pushing for 18. This has to be the end of it. I understand with things like the college football playoff. Everyone was talking about, it should be 4, maybe we go to 8 and then 12. But if you go there, would you then push it to 16 and what have you? But I think 18 games just has to be the limit. Again, I'm not saying that, I'm not one of these people that says, the NFL players are soft, they need more time off or anything like that, or they get the whole off season to recover, they can play next. I'm not saying anything like that. But I think 18 games has to be the absolute limit. Because if you want to go more, then you're taking more preseason games away, which is really the only time for players to get some level of warm-up done. If you take that away, you're going into full contact for 20 games. That's just too much. So I just hope that when this is all said and done, we just have the 18 games. And that is, again, let's just hope that is the end of it, because there will be some people, mainly the money men, who will think, maybe we can squeeze an extra, maybe get it to 19, so that you can have 18 regular season games, and then everyone plays a game abroad over the course of the year and what have you. But I just think 18 games has got to be the maximum. It just has to be. You cannot put these players through more than what they are already putting themselves through. It might be good for the fans, but it's not good for the players. Regardless of how well they keep themselves in shape and what have you, there is just a limit. And on the subject of staying in shape, that moves us very neatly onto our third NFL topic of the day. And after we talked about Tom Brady last week and his desire to potentially unretire and the fact that he might still want to come back if the right offer comes along and what have you, it seems as if there's another Hall of Famer that hasn't quite, Tom Brady's not a Hall of Famer, he will be, and so will this next guy, a obvious Hall of Famer, in J.J. Watt, who has had a very good transition, I think, into being an analyst with CBS Sports. And even though he's only been there very briefly, he's going to be a media personality for a very, very long time. I think he's got the personality, he's got the knowledge, he's got the pedigree. He's going to be outstanding as a studio analyst. But much like Tom Brady saying he might come back, it looks as if J.J. Watt is also in that mindset, because he was speaking to the Houston Chronicle about potentially coming back, as it seems that all players within that first couple of years of retirement will always be asked, are you coming back? And J.J. Watt doesn't seem to be against the idea. Again, speaking to the Houston Chronicle, he said, I mean, I told D'Amico, that's D'Amico Ryans, the Houston Texans head coach, I told D'Amico last year, I said, don't call unless you absolutely need it. But if you ever do call, I'll be there. And he knows not to call unless he absolutely needs it. This is the last year I'll tell him that. Because I'm not going to keep training the way I've been training. But he knows that if he ever truly does need it, I'll be there for him. I don't anticipate that happening. They've got a very good group. But he has still put those feelers out that he could potentially come back. And let's be honest, if there's going to be a scenario where JJ Watt comes back, would it not be the Houston Texans? Again, it's the team that he's obviously most well known for. He's got a great relationship with the city of Houston and all that stuff. But given the way the Houston Texans are on that upward curve, the way we saw the Detroit Lions over the past couple of years, getting from to the NFC Championship game, the Houston Texans, with their turnaround that they're going for, I don't think it's inconceivable that they could make the AFC Championship game this year after their great showing this past season. And if there is an injury on the defensive line, it just makes perfect sense that they'd want someone to go and give them that extra 10% and bring the leadership in and take them over the line. And more often, perhaps most importantly, get JJ Watt his ring. Because there are a bunch of players out there that we always talk about. Dan Marino, probably the best player ever to play without winning a Super Bowl ring. JJ Watt on the defensive side of the ball is probably, again, I can't go back 50 or so years. There may have been someone in the 70s or whatever that I'm overlooking. But at least in my memory, and at least I think in many people's recent memory, I don't think there's a more deserving defensive player that deserves a Super Bowl ring as much as JJ Watt does. So something to keep an eye on. But I just really want to talk. That's the JJ Watt stuff was to sort of just preface the point I want to make, which is, can we stop asking athletes whether or not they are going to come back? Can we not just let them enjoy their retirement? I mean, yes, there might be some. Can we just understand that there's like a base level that, once they are retired, yes, they are probably still in shape and could get back up to reasonable speed within a couple of months or a couple of weeks, depending on what sport it is. But once they are retired, can we not just assume that they are retired? Again, I understand that, like Tom Brady will make us think. There will be the odd people that make us doubt whether and what their true intentions are. But just as a base level, how many people retire and then come back? They are very much in the minority. So just moving forward, I just think we need to start changing the discourse and the discussion around retired athletes and just assume that they are retired and are not coming back. And stop asking them the questions, because it's not really serving anyone anything in the grand scheme of things. Yes, it gives us something to talk about, but again, for the most part, the conversation, it will be just what JJ Watt says. Yes, I can do it if they need me at a pinch, but I don't expect it to. Are we really going to be getting any different answers than that for the most part, when we ask athletes about whether or not they're coming back? So just a note out there, stop wondering whether they're going to come back. Just assume that they are retired and they are not. And then we can act more surprised. And it could be a greater story, really. Rather than leave those hints out there that, they could come back or whatever. Just make it a bigger surprise. Make it a bigger story when they actually do announce that they are coming back. So that's just my, little rant on the thing there. Just stop asking the question and let nature take its course in a way. And speaking of nature, I really do promise that I didn't mean to segue it this way. This is just how it turned out. But for our final story of the week, where I take you away from the gridiron and onto a different bit of sport news, I think the weird story that really caught my mind this week, in fact, there were two, and they're both from the baseball world, and I couldn't leave both of them out just because they are too funny. The first one came in Arizona. Now, they were playing, the Arizona Diamondbacks were playing the Los Angeles Dodgers, and the game didn't start on time, and that's because a swarm of bees had formed behind home plate. Now, if you go and look up on YouTube, there are some times where bees have been a problem in Major League ballparks. There's one clip, ironically, from Arizona, so maybe this is just an Arizona thing, but there was a clip out there a couple of years ago where they did play with bees in the vicinity, but it was in the outfield, so towards where the home runs are hit by the warning track, as it is, where they played through and a ball was hit to the center fielder out there, and he made the catch, and then just rather than slowly jog and celebrate the out or whatever, he hightailed it back out of there. So because he didn't want to be around the bees for too long. So bees can play a part in the game. However, the fact that this was around home plate, so this is around where the umpires are standing for the majority of the game, and the catcher and the pitcher and the batter, you can't really ask them to be stood there for all that time whilst the bees are there. So they had to delay the start of the game whilst they got a beekeeper to deal with the situation, spray them with something, and get them out of the way. Which, all great, he did his job, but the reaction to it was the best bit, because they then allowed him to throw out the ceremonial first pitch, which, if you've ever been to a baseball game, before the game starts, it's like a ceremony, as a ceremonial first pitch, where a former player or maybe a sponsor or a celebrity will just throw the ball from the mound to home plate. It's where you see these hilarious moments like 50 Cent and Carly Rae Jepsen showing why they are singers rather than athletes and just throwing the ball completely away from the strike zone. So they allowed the beekeeper to throw the ceremonial first pitch, which I think was a very, very nice gesture for the Arizona Diamondbacks to do. The second story is another delay situation, and this one is not so much humorous. This one is very much farcical, if I'm being brutally honest, because we understand that weather can get in the way of sporting events, and there are occasionally there will be weather delays. Again, it could be to the start of the game. Maybe it happens in the middle of the game. There's just a thunderstorm comes up in the area, and they've got to take the players off the field for 30 minutes to an hour or so whilst they let the situation go, for the safety of not only the players but the fans as well, to make sure they can be inside away and sheltered away and everything. So we understand that. However, this weather delay came at the absolutely worst time for the St. Louis Cardinals and the Chicago White Sox, because the game was in extra innings. It was the bottom of the 10th. So the Chicago White Sox had a lead in the game. They were up 6-5, but the St. Louis Cardinals were trying to get the game back. They had the bases loaded with 2 outs and down by a run. So basically, all they really needed was one hit into the outfield. Then they could have either tied the game or won the game, depending on where the ball was hit. But that was the time where the umpire decided that he was going to call for a rain delay. Literally at the moment that everyone looks forward to in baseball. Bases loaded, 2 outs, 1 batter left to face. And at that moment, the umpire signals to the grounds crew to get the tarps on and we'll resume this game later. Now, if you look for the footage, you can kind of sympathise with the umpire here because it was pouring down. But there is that bit of you that just thinks the players, they can survive one more. All we really needed was a hit would have told you if it could have been an out, it could have been a fly ball, it could have been an out, which would end the game and give it to the Chicago White Sox. It could have been a single, which tied the game up for the Cardinals, in which case you bring them off and we'll decide the game later. It could have been a double, in which case the Cardinals would win, and then that's the problem over. I just think to call for a rain delay at that point of the game, I just think is just a little bit unnecessary by the umpire at that specific point to call it then. And then after all the fuss and feather, after a 3-hour delay, the White Sox eventually got the out and they won the game. But just a really bizarre situation all round in St. Louis. But a bizarre ending to that game and a bizarre ending to this podcast. And once again, I thank you very much for joining and spending part of your week. If you are new, again, you can like and subscribe if you liked what you heard. And if you're a returning listener, thank you very much for your continued support. And until next week, when I shall be speaking to you again, you guys all take care, and hopefully no bees disrupt your week, and hopefully no weather disrupts your week either. So until next time, take care.